Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of AA Entertainment. We're finally here. Today, the countdown ends, and I will finally be discussing my top 5 favorite films of all time. Now, I have made a shit ton of top 10 lists, top 20 lists, not only for this video, but for friends over the years. For these top 5, these movies have been on those lists, all of those lists for the past 5 or 6 years, 3 of which have been on all of those lists for the past 8 years. These are the top 5 films I consider to be not only my favorite, but the greatest films ever made. At number 5, American Beauty. As I have mentioned in my previous video about my favorite films of 1999, American Beauty has aged like a jug of milk left in front of the furnace. But to be fair, I first saw this film way back in 2014. American Beauty follows the lives of several individuals living in the American suburbs, all trying to live simple lives despite the intense drama and hell they all face on a daily basis. Annette Bening is a sexually frustrated housewife who's failing to pull a profit as a real estate agent. Thora Birch is a teenage girl who has trouble connecting with anybody at school or at home, but ends up falling in love with a troubled boy next door whose dad is a physically abusive former Marine. Kevin Spacey stars as Lester, a middle-aged office worker who is miserable with his wife, daughter, and overall meaningless life. So he does what every boomer would do and quits their steady job with a livable wage to work at a fast food restaurant, because clearly that's far less stressful and meaningful. That being said, American Beauty is full of characters that we all know and bump into in our everyday lives and shows us what goes on behind closed doors. Long story short, there's no such thing as normal. As a matter of fact, the very title American Beauty is a reference to the rose, which, although beautiful upon first appearance, rots from the stem. At number 4, Picnic at Hanging Rock. Based on the novel by Joan Lindsay, and supposedly based on real-life events, supposedly, in the year 1900, a group of girls from the Appleyard School in Australia went on a picnic at Hanging Rock on Valentine's Day. While the majority of the group remained stationed at the bottom of the mountain, 4 students opted to travel further up the rock. Only one returned. This leads to an all-out rigorous search party, including 2 young men who saw the girls just prior to their disappearance, one of whom is played by Wolf Creek's John Jarrett. On top of that, we learn about the troubled lives of some of the students, particularly one of whom is an orphan. I first saw this film when I was 15 and it was on Turner Classic Movies. I put it on for some background noise while I worked on my homework for high school, and I was fucking glued to that screen. Seeing the tension building of the girls navigating the way through the rock and getting lost scared me to the point I just had to turn off the TV and lock myself in my room for the rest of the night. Years later, I got a DVD copy through the Criterion Collection and watched and rewatched this underrated gem from the Outback hundreds of times. Even though I think it's virtually impossible to make a perfect film, I have to say this movie comes pretty damn close. Picnic at Hanging Rock is simultaneously breathtakingly beautiful and pants-wettingly terrifying. All in all, just in its tone, I haven't seen any film quite like it. At number 3, The Last Emperor. Directed by Bernardo Bertolucci, the notorious Italian filmmaker shifted from shoving sticks of butter into Maria Schneider's ass to a highbrow 3 to 4 hour film chronicling the life of the last emperor of China, Puyi. The film follows the tragic Puyi from his early years as a literal baby being torn from the arms of his mother and sent to rule the closed-off forbidden city, and into his death as a penniless elder living a humble life after the fall of the empire he once ruled. Watching this film is like watching 3 separate films, in a good way. At first we are treated to an insight into the ancient and almost mystic forbidden city. Later on, he is struggling to maintain position as emperor while negotiating with Japan. We see him struggling to adapt to Western society in the Roaring Twenties. All the while we cut to as a political prisoner being interrogated by the Chinese. The film also stars Peter O'Toole as Puyi's English tutor, Reginald Johnston. The score and cinematography is absolutely breathtaking, and I love how, as the film evolves, Bernardo Bertolucci dives head-on into creating almost different worlds and grasping every detail, throwing the audience almost off balance, which is how the real-life Puyi must have felt. Being separated as a child from his mother only to be exiled from his empire as an adult. Watching those whom he loves either leave him or be torn away from him is an absolute gut punch, and through the intricately layered script, the film makes sure to hold on to those heartbreaking moments. There are actually two versions of the film, a theatrical cut, which is 2 hours and 43 minutes, and a director's cut, which is 3 hours and 38 minutes. I personally recommend you check out the director's cut because even though the two versions are pretty much the same, the director's cut does include a couple of scenes I personally favor, which are kept out of the theatrical cut. The script is spot on, the cast gives 110%, and just watching the story unfold is really mind-boggling. Personal fact, I kept the poster of the film as a wallpaper for my phone for about a year. At number 2, The Fall. Released in 2006, The Fall is to date the only screenplay director Tarsem Singh ever wrote, unfortunately. When I first watched The Fall, my mind was absolutely blown within the first frame of the film. With the truly captivating shots combined with Beethoven's Symphony No. 7, the film automatically hooks you and without you truly knowing until the film progresses. The opening credits tells you an entire film's worth of story in just a couple of minutes. Roy, as a washed-up silent film star who suffered an extreme injury after a stunt involving a horse has gone terribly wrong, leaving him bedridden. One day he meets a little girl who also suffered a fall, named Alex, who comes to visit him one day. In hopes of manipulating her to snatch him some more morphine to feed his addiction, he begins to tell her an epic tale involving an Indian with a bandaged thigh, an Italian explosives expert, a slave, a gap-toothed bandit, a mystic, Charles Darwin, and his monkey friend. The 6 men all have one thing in common, a hatred for the ruthless Governor Odious, which sets them out on a mission to find him and destroy him. The cinematography is profoundly breathtaking, the screenplay is truly epic, the music is otherworldly, the costumes are an absolute highlight thanks to the legendary costume designer Aiko Ishioka, who also worked with Tarsem on, well, all of his films, and Francis Ford Coppola for Bram Stoker's Dracula. The entire film is a real roller coaster of emotions, and Tarsem Singh really has a knack for bringing together Roy's total and utter despair and heartbreak, as well as Alex's innocence and whimsy into the larger-than-life frame story. Although my absolutely favorite film of all time is coming up next on this list, I can say with the utmost confidence that Tarsem Singh's The Fall is truly the single greatest film ever made. At number 1, my personal favorite film of all time, Shadow of the Vampire. Shadow of the Vampire is a 2000 film directed by E. Elias Meraji. After having seen the harrowing and surreal one-of-a-kind feature-length film Begotten, which is totally a film you need to watch, Nicolas Cage, yes, Nicolas Cage, gave the young and upcoming Meraji the director's chair for the film. When Nosferatu was released to the masses in 1922, audiences were mortified by the very appearance of Max Schreck as Count Orlok, the rodent-like centuries-old bloodsucker, so much so that there were rumors the mysterious actor was a real-life vampire. Despite the fact he previously worked with Murnau in The Haunted Castle just 1 year prior, that is where the screenwriter Stephen Katz came in and said, "Hey, what if Schreck really was a vampire?" John Malkovich stars as the sadistic and dangerously determined film director F.W. Murnau, dead set on creating the most terrifying and authentic supernatural film of all time. Murnau goes to hell and back to find the star of the show, Max Schreck, played brilliantly by Willem Dafoe. While most actors demand food and a paycheck, Schreck only asks of Murnau for one thing, Greta Schroeder, the female star of the film. To be honest, as much as I admire the 1922 film, Shadow of the Vampire holds a special place in my heart, especially since I saw it prior to the original silent film. The whole atmosphere and music has an ultimately timeless feel to it and an overall dreamlike and ghostly quality. The score is brilliant and the set designs are otherworldly. I love the dark humor and can really appreciate the fact that Murnau is more obsessed with getting his film completed that he's willing to sacrifice the lives of his cast and crew to the immortal vampire. On top of the bleak and haunting atmosphere the film has from start to finish, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek moments scattered throughout, including a scene where Count Orlok gets drunk with the producer. Meraji also gives the character of Max Schreck a lot of pathos, so much so that Murnau appears to be more of an inhuman monster in comparison. I would also like to shine a spotlight on Udo Kier and Cary Elwes, who give career-defining performances. Shadow of the Vampire has been my absolute favorite film of all time since I was a kid, and I doubt that's ever going to change. If you haven't seen this masterpiece already, I highly suggest that you do ASAP. Thank you so much for watching this, and let me know in the comment section down below what your personal favorite movie is.